back to the garage. Today's plan is to go ahead and get the front brakes on the truck, and after that we're ready to run brake lines and fuel lines and stuff to the front half anyway. I've already put one side together, and I'll go through this side step by step with you. So as I mentioned, I went ahead and put this side together here. So those are the PAL nuts that I was able to purchase. Well, they're actually for an LLV, so a long life vehicle. Anyway, they fit perfect and do exactly what we need. And those are the calipers that we rebuilt with a set of ceramic pads. Got new rotors. I've taken and packed all the bearings and everything. And these are our junkyard dust shields. So that's this side together. So how about we put the other side together? So the first thing I want to do here is put my dust shields on. So the first thing we have to do before we put it on is, this is the seal that goes right here, right? So this is the original ones that came out of those dust shields. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to clean them up, and then I'll put it in there. And then we can put our shield on. Okay, so I just cleaned it up the best I can here, and it just slips right over top of here like this. And the reason we're reusing them is they're actually discontinued from GM. So here's a finished product of our dust shields. I've just taken and kind of cleaned them up and knocked the rust off, primed them, and just gave them a coat of paint. So it goes on like this. And we just line up our holes. I've taken and cleaned all these bolts up. These are actually, the bolts came off the Cutlass as well, because they were in far better shape than the rounded off ones that I had to take out of here. And they're a 7/16 head. Hex on them, so I'll start those loosely and then we can go ahead and tighten those up. I'm just going to snug them up. There is actually a torque spec for them though. The bearings, I personally prefer to put on nitrile gloves to do this, just because grease is pretty disgusting sometimes when it comes to trying to get it off your hands, especially if you're going to handle anything that's been painted and clean, right? So I bought new bearings for it here, which are just national bearings. I've had pretty good luck with their bearings. So these rotors already have the races installed, so we won't need the races. We will clean those races up prior to installing the bearings though. Get these out of here. Same thing, the outer race is already installed, so we don't need it. Okay, I've shown this tool before, and it's just a cheap bearing packer. I think this one's made by Lissel. And it was about 13 bucks, I think, on the high side. I don't even think I paid that much for it. So it's handy. So we'll do our inner bearing first. So you just take it, you lay your bearing in, put the lid down, tighten it down, and you'll see it's got a grease nipple here, so you can use a grease gun. So I got my old grease gun here, and we'll just go ahead and pump the grease into it. You'll see all the grease in here. So our bearing's now full of grease. So what I usually do is, you'll see all the grease has been pushed through it. So I'll take a little bit and I just go around the outside edge and I just put it on the outer portion of the rollers, just so that they don't dry start. In reality, is it something I probably need to do? No. And I take a little bit of the extra grease that's usually inside the center of the bearing here, and I take and I just put it in the cavity. You don't need to fill that cavity. Some guys do. I do not. But I do take a little bit extra grease and just put it on the bottom here and kind of lube up the race while I'm at it. So put that in there now. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pack the other bearing here, and then we'll go ahead and put the seal in. You can do it the other way, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just already goobered up here and wearing gloves, so I might as well get this portion of it done now. Now this is just, I think it's actually Napa grease. If it's not, it might be Sunoco. It's just wheel bearing grease. Nothing particularly fancy. They all meet the same standards anyway. Okay, so there's our outer bearing packed and ready to go when we are. Put that over here for now. Give my hands a wipe. And the next thing we'll do is, we've got our new seal. And what I usually do is I take just a little bit of grease and I just go around the lip of the seal, just so it's, when it goes over the spindle, it's not dry. Set that in there. Notice my my specialty tool here. It has put in many seals and bearings and braces and just like that. I'm gonna come in here and we'll give this all a good wipe. And the next thing we're going to do is take a little bit of brake cleaner and we'll clean the face of the, well, the friction face of the rotor anyway. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is take our rotor, we're going to slide it on. Okay, and the next thing we can take is our rotor bearing. And it can go in now, like that. Take this grease here. Okay. And we'll get our washer and our nut. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is the bearing setup. Now this is one of those things where everybody has a different opinion. So what you're going to see is my opinion and how I was taught to do it. It turned out I had a brand new pair of basically wheel bearing nut kits sitting here, so that's kind of neat. You can replace all that stuff too over here. So the way I was taught to set bearings, yes, these are vice grips. So we're going to go all the way tight. We're going to take, we're going to spin our rotor. Now we're going to go back, quarter turn, spin our rotor. We're going to see if there's any lash. Now we're going to go back tight, give it a turn, and now we're going to go a quarter turn, which is about here. And the bonus is lines up for us to put our cotter pin in. And you've already seen how I do my cotter pins. Okay, so what I was taught with dust caps is, if they don't fit tight enough, what you do is you take your dust cap, right? And I'm hoping the camera will focus enough, but you'll see I've put a little dimple here, put one here, and put one up in this corner, so that when we hammer it on, it'll fit a little bit tighter. Now to put them on, I usually just find a socket that's pretty close to fitting. That's the dust cap on. Okay, so when it comes to caliper installation on this style, everybody has their own opinion, right? So what I do is I take a little bit of anti-seize and I just put it where the caliper is going to be sliding on the spindle. Why? Because that's a metal to metal contact. Now I do the same thing with where the brake pads touch the caliper, right? And there we go. Okay, so we're just gonna let that sit for a second there. Now when it comes to the pins, I put just a little bit of anti-seize where it's going to be metal to metal inside that sleeve. Okay, and we can go ahead and tighten those up. So what I'm actually going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to go ahead and actually loosen off that bracket that the brake hose goes onto, because putting the brake hose on is our next step. And it's just easier to do it if I do not have it on the truck. Okay, so I'll do is I'll put the brake hose on this bracket first. Okay, so with the brake hose on here, it's pretty much what it looks like. Right? So that's our pal nut that holds the line on there. Alright, so now I'll put that back on the frame rail and then we can deal with the caliper. Okay, so with that loosely back on the frame rail, basically right here is where this needs to go. Now you'll see the white stripe that's on the side of our brake hose. That is a reference line, and they put that there so we can look at it and know that our line isn't twisted if we have to contort it to get it to fit on anything, right? That's the whole idea of that. So basically it's going to come up to the bottom here, and our banjo bolt is going to go through it. Now I found new banjos that I had in my toolbox, funny enough. So I'm going to put our washer on. It's going to go through the hose like this. Then we're going to put another washer, and then we're going to tighten it down on the caliper. So that is the hose installed. Now it may look a little tight right now, but keep in mind the steering's currently at full lock. Somewhere it won't be very often. Okay, so that's our front brakes completed now. Got our components everything's on and tight. So at this point, the truck now has all of the front steering, suspension, and brakes set up, basically. So the next step will be to get the rear diff ready to go in.